So last fall, I got back into baseball. I'm a Mets fan. We suck right now. But in the fall we didn't suck. And there's been kind of this movement of queer people who are into the Mets, which is very adorable, pretending that Juan Soto is non-binary and stuff. It's great. So it was kind of it made sense for me to get into the Mets again. But honestly, I just really needed a distraction. It was a really horrible, brutal time, and it felt like, my organizing life, my personal life, everyone was talking about the election, and I just needed 2.5 hours daily of just not having that. I was at a bar that I really like with some friends and watching the playoffs, and there was an ad for Donald Trump that said that Donald Trump was for you, not the they thems. And that was really weird for me because I'm a they them. And I knew he had a chance to win. It wasn't 2016, right? But it was really weird to see that, to just kind of see my identity blasted on national TV like that. It made me feel scared, but there was also something profoundly silly about it. And one of the things I think about authoritarianism is its ability to intrude in your life. I think authoritarianism in a lot of ways is just the political form of that nosy neighbor who has a lot of opinions on how you keep your front lawn. Trump won, the Mets lost, and January came. And I think I did not expect things to move as quickly as they did. Certainly my trans comrades and I did not. And there was that week of just hell. I think that was the week where, he banned trans people in the military. He did the banning children social transition in schools, and he banned trans medical care. There's a sense with all of Trump's executive orders where, is this real or is this old man yelling at clouds kind of thing? But what really sent me into a tailspin was NYU Langone, which is the city's premier hospital system, private hospital system. It came out that they were canceling gender-affirming care for children. And that was really shocking because I think in the first Trump term, we saw a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing, but now we saw liberal institutions caving. So I do what I do when I'm always anxious. I come up with an organizing plan. And while I had kind of expected a slow rollout, but while I was working on it, I got a call from my mom. I grew up in New York, and my mom is still on all of the parent listservs, even though I am not a child, but so it goes. And she says to me, what is DSA doing about this? Everyone's asking what's happening. And I realized that if we didn't spur into action, no one was going to. So I talked to some of my friends who were in DSA, and one of the wonderful things about DSA is you get to meet so many trans people. And within 48 hours, we had a protest outside of NYU Langone that had 2,000 people in attendance. We were really careful to make sure that this was only the beginning. We handed out QR codes with letters to the board of NYU Langone. We handed them out at the protests, and we also plastered them all over social media. And we ended up building a list of about 10,000 people in the span of just a week. We held a mass call, and we really wanted to make sure that we weren't just going to say, hey, thanks for coming to the protest, go home now, So what we did was we made sure that we were following up with everyone. So we did a mass call, we created campaign systems, we plugged people in, we started onboarding. And we had experience from other types of campaigning, so we knew exactly what to do. We were just doing it on a much faster and more intense time scale. And it was really great just on a personal level to see everybody come out like that. We make up, trans people, we make up 3% of the population or something, some incredibly small amount. but to see so many people come out and to see, like, when you're an organizer, you know which topics there's like an electricity behind them, you know, and you seek those out. And to see that trans rights were one of those topics was incredible. So we've gained 250 members to DSA specifically through our trans organizing work. Our working group is huge now. We have like 30 leaders in it. But most importantly is we collaborated with the Zoran Mamdani campaign on his trans rights platform. And what we explicitly wanted to do was use the power of New York City to provide free gender affirming care, and I say free in case insurance companies decide to boot us off, free gender affirming care, not just to people in New York City, but across the country. There's no reason at all that we can't use telehealth and mailing prescriptions to people across the country to undermine state bans. The Zoran campaign was always eager to work with us. You know, we're like that. We wrote the platform with him. The team was so happy to work with us on this. And now he's gonna be mayor. And all of a sudden, my work shifts from being on the outside to thinking about how to utilize the fairly significant municipal power of New York City, which is something that is very daunting. It's something that is making me very anxious, but it's also something that's incredibly exciting. And I think that the model that we used in New York is 100% replicatable, both in terms of our trans organizing, but also getting Zoran elected mayor. And using the creative power of municipalities, of states, really of wherever we can grab onto power, we can prevent a lot of these really horrible things that are coming down the pipe. So there is a really exciting horizon ahead of us in New York, and I'm excited about that. And I'm also thinking a lot about how we are going to successfully accomplish that.
Thank you, Dan. If I can, one of the things that the National Trans Rights and Bodily Autonomy campaign has done, starting last year, we encouraged chapters to work on trans sanctuary cities and abortion sanctuary cities. And there's obviously multiple reasons for that, but one of them is that it can, if we do it, form a basis for a national mutual aid network like Daniel was talking about. Sai.
Great. Start my timer here. Hi, my name is Sai Clark. I'm a transsexual woman of color, a former addict and sex worker, and I use she/her pronouns. Just to give a quick rundown of my organizing background, in DSA, I currently sit on the steering committee of the Trans Rights and Bodily Autonomy Campaign Commission. After being appointed in August last year, I'm also on the steering committee of the Queer Socialist Working Group, where my primary responsibility is social media management and copywriting. I'm a proud member of AfroSoft Caucus, where I sit on the Comms Committee, and I'm also a member of the International Committee Palestine Subcommittee. At the local level, I'm the co-chair of DSA North Texas, which is my primary home for organizing and where I founded and chair our chapter's Queer Feminist Working Group. Examples of some work that we've done are passing a trans sanctuary resolution in Dallas County. We've compiled a resource document that contains information for finding queer and trans affirming services, rarer than you think even in Dallas. Educating people on the political framework of Marxist feminism and building robust coalition with unionized labor, anti-war and Palestinian-led organizations, immigrant and racial justice groups, and other more mainstream LGBTQ advocacy groups, both underground and above. And speaking of underground, we have been exploring some new approaches, one of direct confrontation and contradiction with the state. So during Texas's recently ended legislative session, we saw laws passed that strictly designate male and female as biologically determined and ban document alteration as well as revert previous changes, including mine, birth certificates and IDs. They passed a law that incentivizes insurers to drop trans patients by demanding onerous coverage requirements. Basically the way it works is If you are going to offer gender affirming care, you also have to offer detransition care, everything up to all kinds of surgeries, and it applies retroactively. So even if you weren't on that insurance provider and you start getting gender affirming care, they are required to cover all of detransition care. Okay, and a law that explicitly permits the abuse and torture of trans and queer youth through allowing conversion therapy and by legitimizing familial rejection and severely limiting protections. So what can I say about being trans in America that hasn't already been said? I live in Texas. Circumstances there are unlikely to change anytime soon. The framework of cruelty and denial of dignity used to make Texas one of the most difficult places to get an abortion is being taken up by the same legislators to ensure no trans person may access their right to self-determination. The state is actively hostile to my and my loved ones' way of life. Yes, many years ago, I felt I had a way out. As with abortion, there is the option to leave, go somewhere where you feel like your body belongs to you, to do with as you wish. Many years ago, trans people clenched our teeth and clutched the edges of our chairs as we saw the liberal political mainstream defend us for all the wrong reasons. Trans rights are human rights, trans women are women, protect trans youth, remember? So where are we now? I think we're living in the unfortunate aftermath of the flawed piecemeal approach to sustaining trans life by a political class that wants you to work when you're sick, that considers pitching a tent to survive a crime against property, that happily shuffled right on immigration, legal or otherwise, the effects of which we're now seeing, that allowed police to destroy encampments and arrest students protesting a generational crime against humanity, and that continues to vote to send money to a genocidal colonial ethno-state that live streams its ethnic cleansing campaign and lashes out at its neighbors. It should be clear that placing all your hopes for protection in the hands of the elite is like placing all your hopes in an abusive parent. You've seen what they've done, and you know what they're capable of. So, I want to talk about the word sanctuary. So, the word sanctuary really does sound great, right? Sanctus means holy. And early use was in reference to a church or other sacred place where a fugitive was immune by the law of the medieval church from arrest. Interesting, right? You are still a fugitive and protected by law. Do we remember who makes laws? Do we know how little a supposed law matters when a fascist is out for blood? Are there incentives for throwing certain groups of people under the bus? How well are sanctuaries working for immigrants? Any issues with that? Tax related? Citizenry? Will a judge's intervention make a difference? Does any of this keep us safe? I don't mean to sound crass. What I want to say is that we must shift our approach. Not just us, not just trans people, queer people ourselves, but fundamentally we must reorient our politics around bodily autonomy. It is the one feature that unites struggle, that connects the children of Gaza being starved to the migrants getting kidnapped, to the trans people struggling to find a truly safe place. This means our struggle is by necessity international. I believe a time will come when we will only have each other to rely on, when the state will not only have completely abandoned the marginalized, it already has, but the larger working class. How ready would we be today to meet each other's needs? Could we feed each other, care for each other, ensure we have the medicine we need to survive? If we want to feel safe, if we want to feel protected, if we want our bodies to belong to us, we must begin to wean ourselves off of the state as it exists. It's a hard habit to break, I know, but we must break our dependency before they break it for us, and then where will we be? This isn't to say no state could ever protect us or have our best interest at heart or hold sacred ones belonging to oneself. Quite the opposite, actually. What we are capable of building, what we will build, what many of you are building in your own communities right now, these are the structures, the ideas, the community formations, the ways of relating to each other, caring for each other, that will plant the multicolored international seeds for a future. The key to all of this is bodily autonomy. Capitalism runs on alienated, desecrated bodies. It compels them, it sorts them, it pacifies them, it exhausts them, it maims them, it burns them, it deprives them of joy and eventually of life. This is why socialism is not only the ownership of production, it is the ownership of one's body. Only under socialism and maybe even communism can queer and trans liberation, working class liberation, be fully and permanently realized. I have one small thing. If the city will have you, let them. If the police will ignore you, let them. God dang it! Okay, there we go. If the city will have you, let them. If the police will ignore you, let them. If the doctor will see you, let them. But we must begin to invest in another strategy, a strategy of cooperative reliance, a break, yes, a prefigurative modality that requires a thoughtful vision of the future provided by the people at the margins of society, people like us.
Thank you, Simon. Lyra?
Hi folks, other Lyra Spencer, she, her. I am the co-chair of Chicago DSA, and before that I was co-chair, still kind of am co-chair, of our trans rights and solidarity plank. At the time that Trump got elected, I was also a bit away from the movement. I'd become a bit disillusioned with organizing and had just gotten another job, and was at a bit of a low point as well. And then once Trump got elected, it was truly horrifying. I immediately realized the implications that it had on me, other people, members of both my communities, the trans and Black community, and how hard, truly hard, life was about to get for all of my loved ones. And so I kind of just took that up until the series of Trump executive orders, and one of them was his fake order to ban gender-affirming care for minors 19 and under. And so when that happened, I had quickly learned that UIC, a public institution here in Chicago, one that is very queer, very Black, very brown, very progressive, was in fact preemptively enacting his executive order and was complying with fascism in advance. And the reason why this mattered so much to me is I'm a worker for SEIU, I represent workers at UIC, and so this hit pretty close to home to me. And so as I was looking for a venue to fight this, one of the best venues to fight this was my local DSA chapter, Chicago DSA. And so at the time, I hadn't been really active, but I got involved and let my comrades know what was happening. And we all got together and launched a pretty quick campaign, one that involved both labor, INA nurses, grad students, and we got together and we held a rally. We plugged in our electeds, we plugged in mini unions at UIC, we engaged with student groups, and we platformed trans youth and had them give their stories. And sure enough, a week after this rally, UIC had reversed its decision and decided to continue transgender care for minors. And so that was a very powerful moment for me for multiple reasons. It showed the power of solidarity and organizing, and it showed that we actually can affect some of these outcomes. And it showed the structure and the benefits of having a socialist and a democratic organization like DSA that's very easy to plug in and easy to move action with. And so since that, we have further developed this campaign. It's currently one of the places with the most energy inside the chapters. It's developed many leaders. We've shifted our target. We're now going after queer children who decided to do the exact same thing. We've launched a petition against them, and we've gotten some of our electeds engaged in pressuring them. And so I think trans work is really important for a multitude of reasons. One, it's an area that people are engaged with and people are willing to throw down for. But also, too, we have to fight back against capitalism dividing many segments of the working class and trying to attack the weaker ones until that one's gone and then they further attack other ones. There's the famous first they came for thing that we all know and love, but no matter how cliche it is, it's actually fairly quite true. And so the other reason why we must stand in solidarity with marginalized communities like that is because once they go for them, there's a lesser layer, and we're seeing that now as Trump continues his attacks on migrants and undocumented people, switching those attacks to people who've been naturalized, and God knows where that'll go from there. And so, as someone who comes from two of these marginalized communities, I see very, very big intersections between the struggles for both. For myself personally, although transphobia and anti-Blackness are different historical phenomenons, it's hard for me to tell sometimes which one I'm experiencing at any given time. And so I think that connecting these struggles and showing a socialist perspective and showing that we're, we might all come from different backgrounds, but we're united as a class in the struggle against the owner class is a very powerful thing and is one of our tasks first and foremost right now. Thank you, comments.
Thank you, Luke. I think de-siloing, one of the things that the concepts that has caught on coming out of the Turnbuck campaign is de-siloing the work. The capitalists created these categories, and then we've been working within them, and for some reason that hasn't worked out well for us. So, what we're trying to do is find ways to de-silo and cut across the differences from where they want to divide us. So bodily autonomy could be one. But, as trans people, we look around and we really, 10 years ago, if I didn't know a trans person anywhere in the country directly, I knew somebody that knew them. When we look at our trans comrades, it's very personal, whatever struggle they're going through. Right now, trans unemployment is 18%. If that was the nation as a whole, we would be on the verge of economic collapse. So we're going to do questions. I'm not supposed to be talking, but I told you I would. I'll be taking stack. I'll be doing progressive stack. If anybody's not familiar with that, you may not get to speak in exactly the order that you raise your hands, but probably won't be too noticeable in this group. We're supposed to try to do 3 minutes a question, but I think in our current group, probably good. If you want to ask a really deep question, I think we would all certainly appreciate it. And before we briefly discussed as a group having some availability after the session. So if you're somebody that isn't too comfortable speaking out in public, or you think of your important question a little bit too late, it's cool. Anybody have a question now? Yes, comrade.
I had a question for Sadia.
Yeah.
I'm from Tennessee. I'm at the Mid-South, Memphis Mid-South chapter. I co-chair our trans healthcare subcommittee. I was wondering if you could explain more about what goes into the process of establishing a sanctuary city in such an oppressive state.
Okay, so to be clear, we passed it in Dallas County. It was not a city thing. So city has different jurisdiction than a county. In my area in Dallas, the city itself is difficult. We have a Republican mayor who switched from being a Democrat to a Republican, and I don't know if this is the same everywhere, but they don't have like public political affiliations. So we have some allies in the city, and this is like something that we are trying to work on. But basically what I did at the county was, we had these commissioners. I went to a public meeting that they hold once a month and waited for public comment. I was there for a little over 10 hours because they broke for lunch, and then they went to executive session, and then they finished out the meeting with public comment. So basically what I did was I went up there and I gave a really impassioned speech about why this is important to do. I had everything prepared, and I had a couple comrades there to support me. And I just went up there and gave it my best. And afterward, the 2 county commissioners approached me, Teresa Daniel and Andy Summerman, and both of them were like, we'd be interested in working with you. So by then I had written up some language. That's pretty much what you're gonna do ahead of time, is like you're gonna use people's language that was passed in other places like Norman, Oklahoma, Ithaca. There's several places in the country that have already done something similar. So basically you kind of stitch together one that looks like it could pass in your city or your county, and you take that to them, and typically what they're gonna wanna do is to cut it down really short to about 1 page if they can in a lot of places. Like they like to be very, they don't go all out with the whereases like we do in DSA. They like to keep it straightforward. Yeah, and then, so you meet with them, you talk about the language together, you come up with something that you would both be happy passing, and then I just went to the other county commissioners to basically get them on board for it. And there was really only one guy that was kind of difficult about it, but ultimately everybody else supported it, so he kind of fell in line. But in the picture that we all took afterward, he was like frowning, so I guess he was upset. Yeah.
I'd like to chime in a little bit. We've our group we've won the only 2 trans sanctuaries in Virginia, Alexandria and Arlington, both decidedly not the most conservative parts of the state. But a couple of things I wanted to add on is most states in the country are not home rule states. They're what's called Dillon's Rule. If you're unfamiliar with that, it's a judicial decision going back to the 1800s, but basically you've got there's 2 philosophies of how states delegate authority to local jurisdictions. Home rule basically is a jurisdiction has all the rights that are not denied to it explicitly by the state. Dillon's Rule is the reverse of that. The local jurisdiction only has the legislative authority to which it has been expressly granted. That's 30 some of the states, and then a bunch of the others are modified home rule. It gets a little complicated. The reason I'm saying this is that in terms of establishing trans sanctuaries outside the state level, you have to focus on what essentially are policy resolutions for the jurisdiction in terms of how they approach policy and policy enforcement, because they can't, generally speaking, actually legislate, so they can't pass laws or ordinances. They have to do it based on some other authority, and policy is what they do have. So you focus on crafting a policy resolution that directs county or city staff. There's not a lot of difference between that, except for to some extent politically who's easier to work with. But within the jurisdiction, and those policy resolutions are things like directives to not proactively comply with anything that would, on its face, violate rights under 14th Amendment, things like that. There are also directives to the police. Just be aware that in counties, most that don't have incorporation, policing is done with sheriffs, and sheriffs are elected and therefore independent. And it's a pain in the ass in terms of trying to get policy directives aimed at the over-policing and criminalization of trans folks. So that's something to bear in mind in strategy. In a lot of cases, urban areas are a lot easier to win than rural areas. I'll just say that, just due to the nature of the politics and folks in those jurisdictions. Trying to think of anything else I wanted to throw in, but I think I'll leave it at that in the interest of time. I'm happy to talk about sanctuary stuff at length at any point.
He helped me get mine done. True story.
Anybody? I organize in Tennessee, so I'll just briefly say that my chapter has been taking a look at queer rights for government employees, like the city employees or the county employees, because of the state laws that limit cities' ability to pass ordinances requiring things that the state hasn't authorized. Last I heard, Memphis still had queer right policies for city employees. But there's county, there's surrounding counties or whatever. Another question, please.
Don't be shy.
I have a question. Is it Lyra?
Mhm.
I'm curious what kind of, so I'm from Kansas City. I am not an organizer in that way. I host a lot of queer events, in our city. Creating queer joy, that's like my favorite thing to do. But, thank you. But I've been having a lot of conversations, with our trans brothers and sisters about the work that they are doing. And a lot of them being Black, and they are saying that it is very hard to get other Black, whether queer or non-queer people, to support. Did you have the same experience? What kind of conversations are you maybe having with those people to, to bring in more support? I think it is really important, especially for Black queer people, Black trans people, to have the support of the, other Black people, and they're not getting that.
Yeah, so in terms of support, do you mean like organizing
Yeah.
support, like throwing down for like, events?
Organizing, and even just like, not everybody's preferred way to support is like protesting or, but like, just, yes, having their back in any kind of way, or the willingness to just, like show up as an ally in whatever their preferred way is. Even down to like sharing a post, I don't know if you're having those same kind of conversations, but.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Chicago is a very segregated city, and so that we're trying to do stuff as a chapter to help to help fight against that. And so at our last GCM, I proposed a local multiracial organizing committee to kind of start empowering folks within the chapter and helping us like recruit more Black and brown folks. So because of that, I haven't like found that tension. I will say for me personally, I don't know if I've just gotten lucky with my family and like my community members, but people were way more accepting, and when I'm in Black spaces, I feel way more accepted than I thought I was going to be. You always think the worst when you're transitioning and you're like, everyone's gonna hate me. But I was honestly quite shocked at how many folks, including like my family, even though they didn't like fully understand everything, how welcoming and accepting they were. And so I think there's a lot of structural barriers towards people of color organizing in general. One being, it's hard to organize when you have like 2 or 3 jobs, or it's hard to organize when you can't find childcare. And so there are many of those kind of structural barriers you always kind of have to like fight against. My hope is that having specific like multiracial, like dedicated, focused multiracial organizing can help like empower some of the folks that do have that extra time. There will always be a deficit, right? Like there will always be way more white people that work with 9 to 5, can afford to give up time to like come to a street action or come to a street rally. And so I think what I'm gonna do moving forward, because I haven't found the secret to this yet, but it is a very interesting dilemma. And so I think what I'm gonna do moving forward, being in both these spaces, is to just try to connect the struggle that I was talking about and how like they both relate. There are many things that I experienced, as a trans woman that I thought was just exclusive to being a trans woman, and then I'm just like, wait, no, like this is being a Black woman, like worrying about my hair and just different other things. And so like, I'm gonna be trying to make those connections, and I think through sharing like, hey, some of these struggles are a little different, but that we're like all oppressed people under capitalism. A lot of my family and like my friends, my community, like my Black family community, everything like that, are extremely impoverished. I come from a very impoverished city, Pontiac, Michigan, predominantly Black, very post-industrial kind of story, very much similar to Detroit. But a lot of my trans community is experiencing those exact same things. Many homeless people, many people who have to rely on sex work to have money. Sex work are very exploitative jobs. And so there's a lot of similarities between those two communities. And so I think like making sure that we share that, making sure that we show that like solidarity is very important, and that, you know, not one of us can be free unless all of us are free. I think those are the things that can bring us together and get each other a part of each other's fights.
Anybody else? Thank you.
I guess what got me thinking as well, I think, I don't know if anybody on the panel is an immigrant or a child of immigrants, but I find that my communities tend to maybe shrink themselves and shy away from these issues, out of whatever the fears may be, regarding citizenship, regarding, right, if he's trying to come after naturalized citizens. Yeah, I guess, how do we disseminate that information to these communities and to allies, and yeah, how can we bolster that community as well?
It's a tough question. My grandparents are immigrants on one side of my family, and yeah, you know, it's hard because it's, at least the way it is in my family, is like the women seem to be like really cool about it, and in fact love it, and are like, hey, sister. But basically I don't have any contact with some of my brothers because they're brutally transphobic, unfortunately. So I think the way that we have to do it, at least in the South, where, you know, right-wing ideologies, it can be a little bit rampant even among like immigrant people, is just very slowly, I think, and trying to, I don't know, use people, like I said, like my sisters kind of speak for me and advocate for me, and trying to educate people when you can, but sometimes you just have to accept that, like, you know, a certain type of person is just going to be stubborn. You know, they're a Trump voter, so they're not like acting in their own best interest even. So yeah, I mean, I think it's like a slow thing, but I also think there maybe is a misconception, you know, about Black people, about, you know, Palestinian people, who people think like everybody's queerphobic. And I actually think it's much less intense than people make it out to be. Not to say that you were saying that, but just I think that's just like it's not as huge of a problem as we might think it is.
Anybody else wanna?
I mean, I'm the descendant of immigrants so long ago, I can't claim that. But you know, we've done in DC, we've done a lot of coalition building with immigrant and migrant communities. It may be that DC is somewhat more disproportionately that many of the population that have arrived have been seeking asylum and refuge, because there's a much higher percentage of queer and trans migrants and immigrants in DC. Well, I don't know if it's much higher. I mean, that's anecdotal, but I'm in my sense of observation from things I hear. But and there are challenges within the community, not because but one of the places we built solidarity has literally been, they're coming for both of us. And if you're both at the same time, they're really coming for you. In one sense, it's not an easy conversation sometimes, because there is, you know, as I said in kind of my opening remarks, colonialism exported some of the worst gender, you know, gender beliefs and norms, and brutally enforced them to the point where, I mean, in other parts of the world, they're even more rigid than we are here in almost every case. That's a result of European colonialism. But when it arrives, but breaking through that can be tough. And I think I think to some extent, sometimes it's quiet solidarity, in the sense of, you know, it becomes a lot of one-on-one conversations and if you're engaged in migrant solidarity and mutual aid within the community, even as a non-immigrant, you can end up having one-on-one conversations that I had a conversation earlier today actually. Sadly, sometimes it really takes the personal connection. The thing is like there are so many folks running around who maybe not are aware they know a trans person, or and when and then they hear things about us, and then I also like the amount of pop culture out there. But those personal connections end up making a difference. People, and so one of the part is as an organizer, as a trans organizer, is making those personal connections through just being in solidarity. Yeah, I mean sometimes I have been doing things like delivering food aid, and the person on the receiving end can tell on their face they're not very comfortable about who's delivering. But but it's very easy also for that to become reactive for you, and it's not the easiest thing on earth. But being less reactive about it and it takes time. That's one of the keys. But and I feel like at this point I'm babbling. But it's the key is, as I think as Saya mentioned, it's the solidarity that we're all. It's the oppression of capitalism is why we're all being oppressed, and being able to bridge that gap is sometimes the key to that.
I do think, like, part of my understanding of what's happening, the way I like to put it is that we're all oppressed people. Workers are oppressed people. Once you start digging into a community, every community belongs to all of these different oppressions. There's trans refugees fleeing countries that are being deported back to a place they'll probably get killed. That's a trans struggle. Immigration is a trans struggle. And from the other side, for BIPOC people, there's God knows how many trans people involved. And I think I said a minute ago that the unemployment in the trans community was 18%. For trans people of color, it's much higher. It's a multiple higher. And so, you can't do these struggles the way that they've been telling us to do it. And I think when you really dig into that and wrap your mind around it and start peeling away these differences, then you can go into a different community and you can talk to people, and it's cool. Even if you don't understand their culture, you can talk to them about trans people and help move them along a little bit. Maybe not fix everything, but one of my strange experiences for me was, or an experience not everybody gets to have, is suddenly being out and being labeled, right? Which is an interesting experience. My partner is a trans man, so he went to having all this privilege, which he struggles with. But like for a lot of trans women, all of a sudden you're labeled, and people stop seeing you as a person, right? But once you figure that out, and it gives you a lot more freedom and ability to talk to everybody else without looking at whatever fucking labels capitalism has put on.
I guess if I could add to that, I guess I meant it more in a sense of, I don't think that I'm not, or like it's not that you guys said that, or just I want to clarify, I guess, what I had said. I don't think the issue is so much whatever immigrant communities, like some kind of bigotry we may have. I am very fortunate to have a lot of queer friends back home, queer friends here. I'm from Morocco, and it's not super easy being queer there, so I came for this reason. But I obviously have friends there still. So my point isn't so much that there are cultural barriers to supporting queer rights. I think I mean it more in the sense of I see a lot of the times immigrants trying to hide in the shadows out of sheer fear rather than out of, like bigotry or something like this. I think there is that recognition that we are similar in certain ways in terms of bodily autonomy and things like that. I guess I'm wondering how to actually mobilize people that do have the privilege of either being already born here or if in a sanctuary city, as fickle as you said that is, if we have the privilege of being citizens or privilege of being born here, how can we mobilize immigrant and first generation communities to actually take action, come out of the shadows a little bit?
Around in the DC area, there are some very active immigrant communities. But one of the things in terms of solidarity asks, especially over the last number of months, has been that those of us with privilege, people like me, who get in front. Not that we're leading in the sense of like, there's the savior complex type of thing of where you come in and take over, and that, or you're the ones who will solve all the problems, and that's not what they mean. But it's literally, if by analogy, if you're at a protest, people with the most privilege put themselves in front as a barrier, and that's in a lot of ways one of the bigger asks when it's time for community hearings, type of thing, is getting enough people with privilege out there that there's a literally, to some extent, a human shield. Because we've had fucking ICE literally at the Arlington government buildings when there've been especially when the Section 7 of the trust policy is the technical name of repealing. When they revoked that, they repealed voluntary cooperation with ICE, and there were fucking Border Patrol people in just the government plaza area. We literally sent a bunch of white folks like me, born here, out there doing a lot of reconnaissance, monitoring, following around. They knew we were following, like we were videoing them, and keeping tabs on where they were and reporting back to people who were in the room, so that should it become necessary for folks, we could find alternate ways of getting them out and things like that. Folks can't organize if they feel like the first time they open their mouths, the state's coming down on them with the full weight. It kills organizing, because that becomes the intrinsic I have to hide, because if I open my mouth, and that's one of the keys to why we organize. We are stronger and safer together. We can't do it alone. None of us ever can. And so, in terms of mobilizing, queer immigrant communities who are very scared and have every right to be very scared, it's those of us putting our privilege on the line. I mean, Emma's right. I transitioned and I gave away a certain amount of privilege, and it's really impressive when you realize how much privilege you've given away at times. But I still have a fuck ton more privilege, being white and born here than a lot of folks do, and we still have to figure out ways to put it on the line. Because when we're willing to do that, folks are willing to get involved and come out and pop. I don't want to say pop out, but get organized. And then also, that solidarity also shows the power of community. So.
To add on to that, when Zoran first kind of approached DSA leadership about running, his pitch was, he said, I'm going to get socialists to vote for me and I'm going to get Muslims to vote for me. And a bunch of us, myself included, I was like, okay, yeah, no, you'll get the millennials to vote for you, I'll vote for you. But it's going to be really hard to expand your coalition beyond that. And holy shit, I was wrong. In a way that makes me feel like I need to reevaluate everything. It was funny, Tom Suozzi, the horrible centrist Democratic congressman, wrote in the Wall Street Journal, kind of an anti-Zoran op-ed. It's stupid, don't read it. But one thing he said was, he was like, one thing we can learn from Zoran is Zoran focused on cost of living and not trans and other silly gender issues or whatever. And it's funny because I'm like, Zoran is literally attempting to do what conservatives say, you know, we want to do, which is provide gender affirming care to anyone who wants it for free, and we're gonna like ship people, we're gonna fly people in and pay for their hotel rooms, and we're gonna do all of the like Fox News stuff. Like, we're getting ideas from Fox News. I watch it, I'm like, hey, we'll do that, thank you. So with a message of like, but what Zoran did do is he looked for the lowest common denominator, right? Which in New York is cost of living. It's hellish for everyone. It's hellish if you're an immigrant family, but it's also hellish if you're a trans person, right? Like, trans people suffer from homelessness at higher rates than the general population. We make less money, we suffer from higher unemployment. Basically, like, when you use the politics of solidarity, you are automatically targeting the most marginalized. You are automatically targeting the most marginalized communities, because the most marginalized communities are experiencing the hellishness of capitalism the most acutely. So it was very smart of him to do this, and it very much reframed a lot of my thinking on the subject. So in language about, you know, trans rights, I always would say, you know, we are the tip of the spear, right? The Niemöller poem that everyone knows that's on the Holocaust Museum. You know, like, you come for us, you're next. You know, and for immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants, you know, right now trans people and immigrants are really at the tip of the spear, although that spear is growing by the day. And that kind of politics of universal solidarity, kind of really leading into solidarity politics, has an incredible way of uniting people. To the point where, like, yeah, no, I'm sure there are people who voted for Zoran who are transphobic, right? I'm sure there are people who voted for Zoran who, you know, don't have like the best opinions on other stuff. But when you have that politics of solidarity, you create room for creating that coalition, you create room for changing people's minds. And on election day, I mean, like, Muslims are now a voting bloc in New York City elections. That wasn't the case before. It was like non-educated whites, educated whites. I love election demographics, Latinos and Black voters. Now it's also Muslim voters. And parts of Brooklyn that are like, have the worst fascists you've ever met, but also have Muslims living there. Normally they vote for like the worst politician imaginable, but this time they voted for Zoran. Sheepshead Bay, which is like a ton of the most reactionary Russians you've ever met who walk around shirtless, and I wish they would put shirts on. Please, your chest is so hairy. Those districts voted for Zoran. And that was because Zoran led with solidarity politics. And that's the lesson for us, is we are all in this together. The enemy's name is capitalism, and we have to fight him together. And I think that and to your point about that kind of fear of stepping out into the light, that's something that I have a lot of trans friends who are just terrified right now, and it breaks my heart, you know. And I have a lot of friends who are immigrants who are also terrified right now, and it breaks my heart. And really terrified to step up into the light. But when you build a mass movement, and when you say like, hey, we're all going to take this step together, that helps create that space. And I think, like, you know, for Zoran right now, the Trump administration is like, we're going to deport him. You know, like, Zoran himself, who's about to become the mayor of the largest city in the United States, is facing the same attacks that undocumented immigrants just trying to get a job at Home Depot are facing right now. And that creates I mean, it's horrible, don't get me wrong, but it creates a really powerful kind of politics. And it's something that socialism uniquely as a political construct can do. And it's something that we as socialists really need to lean into and really need to develop. And it's something where, again, like, if you had asked me a year ago, like, hey, Daniel, are you the best socialist ever? I'd be like, yeah, I'm pretty good at it. But like, after my experience with the Zoran campaign, I'm like, oh no, Like, we have a lot of work to do. And that's great. That's an awesome thing. And it unfortunately means I'm not as good as I thought I was, but you know.
I apologize, I feel like I got off track from your question, but I'll get you, did you want to jump in on that? I felt like you drew your breath.
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm just listening to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, so this is kind of a question for everybody, but, Daniel, your comment around, Zoran, kind of spurred me into thinking, you know, how is, you know, campaigning for trans rights now going to change, and, you know, or will it change, you know, with Zoran coming into office? Like, what is this how are your campaigns going to change? What does that look like now that there's going to be, you know, socialists that are really wielding state power, which we do have elsewhere as well, you know, also thinking, you know, here in Chicago, Brandon Johnson, which is a very, very, very different situation than Zoran. But still, you know, it's like, how do we as socialists kind of use the arm of state power in our campaigns for, you know, trans rights?
Yeah, this is the question that's literally keeping me up at night. So thanks for asking that, Cara. It's a really important question. I think the first thing is we need to be successful. Like, no shade to Chicago, I'm sorry. What Brandon Johnson is, yeah, I know. Just the general people of Chicago, your mayor is a disappointment. Like, what Brandon Johnson and unfortunately many other leftist examples of, you know, who take power show us that, like, if you're not successful, like, that's almost like worse than not winning at all, right? So in terms of trans rights, we need to make sure that we implement the platform before us. Now, luckily, and also when it comes to seizing state power, I learned this doing climate organizing. Passing the law is the first step. Implementing it is the important part. Or, I mean, it's all important, but implementation is really important. So we have a couple of advantages as trans people. The first one is that our population size is like abysmally small, right? So that means if you want to provide healthcare for trans people, you don't have to spend that much money, which is great because the biggest fights are budget fights, right? Climate change, it's like, oh my God, we have to spend how much money? A trillion with a T? Okay, great. Like with trans healthcare, it's a drop in the budget even for a municipality. Like New York City could provide trans healthcare for every trans person in the country who, you know, can't afford it, and it would be a blip on our radar. You know, like, you know how many garbage trucks we have, which is great. This is a great thing.
I was just thinking it'd be about 1% of the NYPD budget.
Yeah, exactly. So like it would be small, which is a good thing. That really helps us. I think with Zoran, we're in basically the best possible position to seize state power that we can be in because, you know, we're like this, right? DSA has regular meetings with him, let alone his team. His policy director is my friend. I've been working with his campaign manager for well over a year. You know, I have friends who are in his staff. So it will come down to, I think, and one of the things that made Zoran really successful with his policy rollouts is specifically relying on DSA. DSA is kind of the home for, like, I've always felt like DSA is the home for like model UN nerds who got like really disenchanted in college. Like, you know, we have a lot of really smart policy people, and if you look at, like, I've looked at Zoran's policies and I'm like, yep, these were floating around group chats and message boards for like 5 years before they ended up in here. So we need to provide not just the like people power, but also the policy chops in order to get this across. And that's something that is in some ways that's the most intimidating part to me, because now it's like we have to turn this into reality. So I'm not really sure what that looks like. I think that it's going to look like, you know, a lot of trying to find the smartest people we can possibly talk to and get their opinions on stuff. I think it's going to look like a lot of kind of, you know, boring policy wonkery, but that's all a great thing. But it's a weird muscle to flex. I'm always used to being on the outside, being like, how can I ruin this person's day? You know, like, how much shaving cream do I need to, like, you know, cover this person's body in it or whatever. I've never actually done that. But, you know. And now I kind of have to like, you know, put on a suit and tie metaphorically, you know, and we have to change that. Yeah, the other thing I'll say is I think that Zoran's victory in November will be really important, especially because New York swung quite to the right in 2024 in a way that was quite terrifying. When Zoran wins again, I think we're going to find that a lot of the neighborhoods he wins are going to be ones that voted for Trump. And we need to take advantage of that narrative, right? Because already the centrist Democrats, and they're very smart, these centrist Democrats, they're already saying like, Zoran's like us, right? Like we're talking about affordability, Zoran was talking about affordability, right? So therefore, we were always right. Like Matthew Lazy has to sound like a Zoran victory toward the asshole. And it's really important for us to make sure that we seize the comms moment of saying like, actually, you don't have to throw anybody under the bus. In fact, throwing people under the bus is a really stupid idea, as that fucking poem we all know says. Like, actually creating a politics of solidarity is what is victorious. And we have to really make sure we are trumpeting that everywhere, because they're going to do, first they're going to try to delegitimize Zoran, and we're already seeing that it's not working. So the next thing they're going to say is, you know, we were right the whole time. And we need to say, actually, no, you were a fucking asshole the whole time. Sorry I'm cursing so much, I'm Jewish.
I'll go next.
I could.
Sorry.
Yeah, well.
As the people who are Squidward behind the bars watching SpongeBob and Patrick run the mood of the Chicago chapter. Yeah, so I'm gonna connect this in a bit, but bear with me. I think the Zoran win is amazing for so many reasons, and I think that it shows kind of the limit of like this like progressive politics, even if it has a little bit of labor backing that is divorced from the socialist movement. I think it shows like the limit of that kind of politics and limit of a politics that's not really rooted in kind of like a democratic organization such as DSA, where we can just jump in and the rate of entry is very low and there's very committed cadre and dedicated folks. Johnson won without a mandate. He kind of barely squeezed through, defeating Vallis, where like Zoran kicked Cuomo's ass. Like it was like almost a flawless victory. And so I think that'll also bear out when you switch into governing from like the campaign session. So our mood in Chicago is very different. We are so jealous of the Zoran moment, but because of this progressive that was backed by labor, we're kind of in this weird moment where we're like, we can't really challenge him, but like, so that field won't be open to us for a while, but we do have some semblances of state power. We have 6 aldermen, and so that gives us like an opportunity to actually use those tools and to wield what little power that we do have, and we are doing that with our trans campaign. And so we're working with one of our alders, Rosanna, to introduce a resolution condemning Lurie's children's health for stopping gender-affirming care for minors. And so even though we can't govern, and even though, you know, like our position's kind of in this weird space, we can still use our electeds to help towards pressure and to help towards like that grassroots game, which is what we can do in this moment with like the tools that we have. And hopefully from engaging in strategic campaigns like what we're doing with Lurie, we can eventually build our chops to hopefully one day have a Zoran moment, just be a little further off from us because of our wonderful mayor.
Yeah, and to that point, like, I think that trans rights legislatively, because of that budget component, like, it's, you don't need the mayor, you know? I mean, it helps, but like, you know, trans rights also, I mean, there are some centrist Democrats trying to throw us under the bus, but like, you know, plenty of, you know, progressive all the way to like liberals are quite supportive of trans rights. So if you're in like a municipality with a Democratic majority and that Democratic majority doesn't suck, there's probably something you can do and you can probably get it through. So that is like a advantage that we have. Like I feel confident that our campaign, you know, probably would have gone quite far even if Zoran hadn't won.
I gotta get on this. So I was just at Pride last Saturday, and on our booth we put up posters for Zoran, and I swear if everybody that walked by didn't know who Zoran was, I mean they did know, it's a Southern thing, they didn't. They knew who Zoran was and they were thrilled about it. Even if they didn't come up to talk to us, they'd point and say, that's the guy, you know. But having said that, let me briefly set up an analogy. I was on a DSA call a couple years ago, I think. There was a gentleman running in Alabama or Georgia trying to run for office. And he was talking about going to the black community, his community, to talk about DSA. And he'd say, I try to talk to people and they tell me that's a white thing, that's not for us, right? DSA, like, the numbers are in the big cities. So a lot of our stuff ends up being centered around the big cities. But then what you have is the rural people saying, that's for college kids, that's not for us. And that's the strategy the Democratic Party has been using for the last few decades, and it's not a winning strategy. If you think back to the big socialist movements, previous socialist movements, they started with fucking miners, right? That was also an anti-racist movement, where near where I live, they freed convicted felons or jailed felons to let them free as part of a mining strike. But we've got to get comfortable, like getting out into rural areas, whatever socialist group you're with, whatever kind of organizing you're doing. If you want to do a mass movement, you've got to have the country involved, the country people involved. It's just not believable otherwise.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Question. To the panel. So my question is, I come from the world of organizing against forced surgeries on intersex children, forced genital surgeries that are happening at a lot of the same hospitals that are preemptively stopping trans care. Namely, you know, Larry comes to mind in conversation about his big name in Chicago. And Larry was actually the first hospital that activists pressured and intersex justice project pressured to stop certain intersex genital surgeries in 2020. And a big part of that campaign was solidarity with healthcare workers. So I'm really curious, in all of your work, like how healthcare workers have played a part, how they've reacted, especially because workers often tend to react differently to unjust policies and administrations that are covering their asses.
I mean, I'll say in our fights with, in our fight with Children's National, we could not have done it without the healthcare workers. One of their big partners was, although they stayed a little bit behind the scenes because of contract issues with Children's, was CIR, the Council of Interns and Residents, which is SEIU. They really helped us extend our reach of our campaign. A couple of doctors came and actually when we picketed the AG's office. For background, in DC, there's a DC law that makes denying gender affirming care, that's literally illegal. So when children suspended care as a result of that EO, they were violating DC law. We went after the DC AG about as hard as we did at Children's because the AG was not stepping up publicly. So the campaign started in two parts. We started first with your standard pressure campaign, letters, phone calls. Between CIR and then various affiliated healthcare folks that we were able to reach through, Pride at Work, which is AFL-CIO, we were able to generate 91,000 letters in 3 days. I don't know where we haven't actually taken that campaign down, so Lord knows, we were up over 100K after a week. We couldn't have done it without the doctors, and without SEIU. The communications networks that we needed are, and yeah, no, you're right, they react really strongly to injustice. We had, one of our best speakers was a doctor at Children's, not going to use their name just because I don't want to get them in trouble, but they're also they're Palestinian descendant, and they connected what's going on in Gaza with, you know, what's good, you know, and the struggles. And so, yeah, I want to say they're important. It's really hard to fight those fights without them.
Yeah, CIR was instrumental for us too in New York. Like on our first rally, we had a speaker from there. Yeah, I think that like in New York, union organizing is actually can be quite difficult because unions have quite a bit of political power. Like a lot of Cuomo's main backers were like some of the most powerful unions. Now they're not backing him anymore though. And that means that oftentimes it's kind of the smaller, more progressive unions we really have to tap into, like CIR. And while like, you know, the nurses union, NYSNA, the New York State Nurses Association, you know, they were very difficult to get in touch with because NYSNA is like one of the most powerful political forces in the entire state, right? So they're just like, you know, they're much harder to get into contact with, to work with. But now we have an opportunity because NYSNA, who had stayed out of the mayoral race, has now endorsed Zoran. And this is why I think it's really important and crucial that trans rights organizing and bodily autonomy organizing be connected to a broader socialist politics, because we would not be able to, we're like working on NYSNA, but the fact that they have now endorsed Zoran gives us a huge leg up in being able to work with them. And I think without the the electoral campaign angle to it, we would not have that. And we see this like again and again and again, whether it's like labor organizing, electoral organizing, trans organizing, when you have an institution, a party, if you will, where you can kind of bring everything in collectively, you can amplify all of each other's struggles. And I think that's something that's really, really important for trans people who, again, make up like 3% of the population. We're just too small, unfortunately.
Any other questions?
I wanted to say something a little bit about answering your question. So my chapter in North Texas waited with bated breath, same as everybody, about the Zoran, the primary election. And, you know, obviously we have been incredibly excited about the win. And we've gotten the most social media engagement that we've ever had without any collaborators, just basically saying, like, we could do this in Dallas. And it's been really great. We've gotten a huge influx of people into our chapter that are really excited. Some people who are just engaging with politics for the first time through this. But the unfortunate reality of the situation is that Zoran being mayor in New York City doesn't help trans people in Texas. And I don't think anybody in my chapter who does this queer and trans organizing for our campaign, for our trans rights and bodily autonomy campaign, is naive enough to think that. But what we can do, and what we have been doing, is using this momentum to kind of, you know, because in red states, this is what I love about DSA, is like, we have to come from a lot of different places, working in a lot of different circumstances to achieve things. You know, in New York City, you're a trans person, you can get your health care, you can probably, I guess if you make money, find a place to live. In Texas, trans people are living on the street, are dying, can't get health care, get beat up by cops, you know, get harassed everywhere they go, nobody will help you. Okay, so we have to deal with different types of circumstances. But, you know, the energy and momentum is what's important here. And I think like we can pursue an electoral strategy. You know, we're working on that. It's a little bit further down the road. But in the meantime, what we can do is get people the health care. That's all I'll say about that. We can make sure people can keep transitioning. We can get people places to live. We can find people places to live. We can get food for people. We can make sure that someone is able to safely travel from A to B. We can teach community defense, all kinds of things to help sustain trans and queer life. And I think, people come through to DSA by way of Zoran, that's awesome. But then we can help them basically become more radicalized. So Zoran is his first step, and then all of a sudden you're doing all kinds of awesome organizing, just joining the organization from that.
We're pretty close to,
Oh, you're good.
okay, we're pretty close to time, so if you're sitting here out of politeness or you need to get somewhere, you do you. If people want to ask some questions, I'm not going to stop talking if you haven't learned that yet. So, whatever y'all need to do. Is there another question or? Yeah, please.
So if we have the opportunity, even mildly, to influence a potential mayor, how did you, or how would I go to the table and say, like, this is what we need for the queer and trans community, for the Black community? Like, what would you suggest would be like, what's first steps? Like, how, I just recently did a panel last week. One of the things that I spoke about are the attacks on our trans community and queer community. And afterwards, I was approached by someone, I don't know that he was running for mayor, there was a lot of commotion, I have a meeting with him soon, but all of this is like reminding me that I have this meeting coming up, and if I have the even, a small chance to say something or share something that could potentially help our communities, what is your suggestion?
Well, it depends on where you live. The first thing is that you need to make sure that trans people are a protected class. So trans people nationally are not a protected class, and the Supreme Court just essentially ruled in their Scarmetti decision that you can't use gender. Gender's a protected class, right? Like, you can't fire someone because of their gender. You can't fire someone because of their race. You can't fire someone because if they have a disability. You can fire people for any other reason you want, though. America. The Supreme Court recently ruled that trans people don't count under that gender umbrella, which is, classic Supreme Court bullshit. So that means that states and municipalities have to make trans people a protected class so that trans people can have the protection of the law. In New York, we have that already. Like, we were really lucky. Like, it was literally like in October, we passed a constitutional amendment granting trans people protected status. Like, we would be utterly fucked had that not happened. So that's a really important thing. The next thing is making sure that, so once you have that, you can use legal mechanisms to guarantee things like healthcare, right? At that point, it becomes illegal to deny someone healthcare because they're trans, right? So at that point, you can hold hospital systems accountable for following Trump's executive orders, individual providers, etc. That's the most important thing in the baseline. From there, I think it really comes down to doing things like making sure that any public hospital systems are providing gender-affirming care, making sure that public hospital systems are providing abortion care. Public hospital systems, we gave up trying to pressure private hospital systems because we were just like, this is way hard, this is very hard to do, and it is easier to just like use the power of the state to hammer them than it is to try to get them to change their mind. Like, NYU Langone is named after Ken Langone, who is a Trump donor. Like, they suck. So if you have so public hospital systems are, like, private hospital systems are like run by cowards. Public hospital systems are much more accountable to the law. And so making sure that they're providing gender-affirming care and abortion care. Then from there, seeing if they can do telehealth, gender-affirming care, and telehealth abortion care. Because at that point, they can give it to anybody, right? And they can, and then, they can prescribe, whatever they want and have it mailed across the country. So that's kind of the order of operations, I would say. The other thing is also making sure that educational systems are not complying with Trump's executive order that essentially cracks down on social transitions. So making sure that, like, however your education is structured is not following that. That hasn't gotten as much play for whatever reason. Again, I think because like public school systems are public and they're much more likely to be like, okay, we have to follow the law, as opposed to private hospital systems, which are like, oh no, we're gonna lose NIH grants, ah! Not that that's not a big deal for hospitals, but like, fuck private hospitals. I think in terms of like, what you need to do is you need to find policy nerds. You need to find the biggest policy nerds you can find. I am not a policy nerd. Everything I just said came because like I know policy nerds who I've just talked to for a long time. There are people who just like live and breathe this stuff. They, again, model UN kids who are lost. They might be lawyers, they might be researchers, We have one healthcare researcher for the SEIU who, quote, has gone above and beyond in his job, as he says of himself. He was incredibly helpful for this kind of thing. But basically anyone who deals with policy, you need someone like that. Even if they can't write the law for you, they can talk to you for an hour. And that hour can be hugely helpful. When it comes to actually getting politicians to do stuff, when we passed the Bill of Public Renewables Act, which was a piece of climate legislation, we wrote the laws ourselves. Did we know how to write a law? No. But crazy thing is, neither do politicians. Like, no one knows how to do any of this. It's all made up. So you actually, as an autonomous individual, like, shouldn't be afraid to just like learn a bunch of stuff and become an expert. I always like to say with climate and now trans rights that I am basically as much of an expert as you can be before you reach master's degree. And anyone can attain that by just reading, by just talking to people. And like, yeah, it's a lot of work, but like you can do it. And it's really important for organizers to reach that level. And like you've kind of seen this all here where we enter like policy wonk mode, where we start talking about like the difference between like unincorporated counties and counties and how chairs are elected and stuff. But this is all stuff that like everyday people can learn. That's the thing that I think is the most important, is like, there is nothing, I'm just a teacher who freaked out about climate change one day. Like, there's nothing particularly special about me other than my great looks. And I think that means that like really anyone can get there.
Where are you in the country?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay. Are you just going to lobby somebody, or what specifically are you doing?
I mean, they just approached me after this panel, and a part of what I do in the city is relationship building. So it's very natural for me to have these kind of meetings. And so, like I said, I don't even remember if what he's running for in our city. I just remember him telling me that, and as you guys are speaking, thinking like, oh, that could be an opportunity, even a small one, to make an impact there. So, what I do for a living, I work for a company, published television called Kansas City Defender. I'm a reporter. And so I spend my time like writing, and did this panel because of my background in spirit events. So, just an opportunity.
I do want to be a bit of a policy nerd here. My background, poli-sci econ, and public policy education degrees that I don't actually use for work. So the Skrmetti decision is really interesting because it's at odds with Bostock. Bostock was authored by Gorsuch and actually did, under Title VII of civil rights law, add gender identity. So that precedent from the Supreme Court does actually protect gender identity. Skrmetti puts us on a collision course for that one to get reheard.
Yeah, there's so many fascinating legal topics. Like, it's really interesting if it didn't involve like actual people's fucking lives.
I mean, they used the technicality to say that the reason Skrmetti was because it was about procedures and medical diagnoses, not about gender identity. They're fuckers. You can quote me on that, all of them. was gonna say, but I agree completely with Daniel. I mean, the first part is I would make sure you know what role they're running for, because what role they're running for impacts what they can do for you. And then, but the priority list that Daniel ran through, I think, is the perfect priority list in terms of considering where and what can be done. I'm reasonably familiar with Kansas City in terms of like legalistic structures, and that Missouri's a Dillon's rule state, so they're going to be limited on what they can do authoritatively, legislatively. God, I wish most of our municipalities had New York's municipal power, because it would actually, like, on at least in urban areas, make our lives or our jobs a bit easier. But that priority list is like fire, so that's kind of the way I'd approach it. But yeah, it's key to make sure you know the role, but also probably good to understand kind of their background, because depending on where they are politically, they're going to have comfort levels. And basically anybody live on right is either you've got libs and centrists who are cowards, and then you've got the right wing who, can die in fires. But one of the things we had fighting Arlington for trans sanctuary was the fact that, like, especially after Trump was elected, they're centrist Democrats, and they all fucking turned into cowards. They like to call themselves progressives, but no, sorry. They turned into cowards. They were all about, we're gonna get this done, and then Trump got elected, and we had to actually, that's where we ended up building the intersectional coalition with our migrant folks, was because they were playing the groups off against each other. So I guess what I'm saying is, before you meet, I'd make sure you know what role and kind of where they align politically, because that should also influence a little bit about what you're asking for, because I mean, it's not wrong to ask for the sky, but there's also a level of if you're trying to actually work with them productively, recognizing what's achievable and what's something of a growth goal later on down the line when relationships are better.
I live in a one-party rural state. It's the wrong party, right? And even if I cross state lines to go talk to a politician, it's almost certainly going to be a Republican. One of the things I found is, let me back up and start from a different spot. A few years ago on Facebook, there was this conversation among some trans leaders about how to approach gaining our rights. And at the time, we were pushing for legislation specifically for trans people. Agenda, I don't know. Anyway, along with queer rights, specifically including trans people. And then, like, out of nowhere, somebody said, well, we've been kicking around the idea of putting forward that sex discrimination. And, that's how we started winning stuff, was it sex discrimination. Gender identity means one thing to us, but it means almost nothing to a Republican. It just tells them, I've got this fake thing I want you to care about. So I find it very important to, whatever phrase I use, and personally I like to use sex, whether it's, talking about non-binary or binary trans people. But you've got to talk in a way that recognizes the realness of the trans people, because they almost certainly won't be used to thinking of it that way. Several years ago, with another group, we went out and specifically knocked on Republican voters' doors. We generated a list of reliable Republican voters and knocked their doors and asked them about trans rights. And universally, what they said, 100%, when I say universally, 100% what they said was, we were asking about financial results versus targeting trans people. And nobody wanted their taxes to go to fighting over trans rights. They felt it was a waste of money. So, I mean, if you steal parts of their language, you have a huge advantage. Also, whether, even, there's some shitheads among the Republicans, we all know that. But the average Republican voter, cares about their neighbors, I went and knocked doors recently, Republican voters, my chapter went and knocked recently Republican voter doors as socialists. I went as a trans socialist, right? But we announced ourselves as their neighbors, and they voted with us. We knocked down 4 ordinances, anti-democratic ordinances the city was putting up, and we stole a third to a half of the Republican voters over to our cause.
Amazing. So language is important.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for staying over and sharing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah. Oh, do you want to shout out ways to plug into DSA's Trans Rights Organizing?
Oh, yeah. I guess that's important.
Just to close.
So, DSA, if you haven't heard us mention it enough so far, there's a national trans rights and bodily autonomy campaign. There's a website for it. You can click a button, sign up, get connected. We'd love to have all of you do so. And if you're not part of DSA, join DSA as well. And it'd be that much easier to join the campaign.
Most of our chapters now have some level of trans rights organizing.
Right.
And bodily autonomy organizing.
And as multiple people said, it's been a huge draw for joining DSA.
Yeah, it's our biggest draw, short of Zora.
Yeah, I mean, DC's, I don't know the exact numbers, but we're up somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 or 700, which is like over 25%, over 25% growth in six, 7 months. And at least there was a point where 40% of the folks joining were expressing interest in bodily autonomy organizing. It is a big time recruiting tool, like not tool, but it's a cause that brings a lot of people. So.